Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tableau Live. My name is Alexandra Roza. I head Tableau's Customer Solutions Organization here in APAC, and I'm going to be your moderator for this panel discussion today on data leadership. I am so excited to introduce you to our panel. We've got three amazing people on the panel today. First of all, Fiona Gordon, Global Director, Business Intelligence Strategy from Jones Lang LaSalle. Fiona is based in Australia. We have Tristan from Zuellig Pharma. He's the VP of Data and Analytics. And last but definitely not least, Sarajit from India, who's the Chief Business and Transformation and Digital Solutions from Tata Steel. Welcome. We're so excited to have you on board. Thank you for being part of this panel today. I'm going to kickstart things by asking you a question about data leadership and what it means to be a data leader. I know I'm talking to quite a few people, they always assume that being a data leader means you've got data in your title. And I know that's not true. I'm speaking with you and in the community. And I'd just like to understand from your point of view, what does it mean to be a data leader? What kind of skills, competencies come with the role? Fiona, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, Alex, and thanks for having me. It's really curious. I believe that anyone could be a data leader. And oftentimes we get analysts who think, it needs to be my VP or my director who's making these decisions and really defining the vision, the strategy behind it. What I find is that sometimes the best ideas come from the bottom up. And so it's really important that analysts have the ability to challenge the status quo, to feel like that they have a voice and can actually talk to people about how data can change things for an organization.
Hey, Tristan, hold true?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, to be honest. If you look at our journey as Zuellig Pharma, it's pretty much how we started, what Fiona was mentioning. You start with individuals at a very kind of operational or so-called level, thinking about how data could help a specific use case, but it was very, very use case and output focused and oriented. And if you want to lead in an organization with data, again, you don't need that big title, you don't need a position of seniority. You just need a good use case that you're solving with a good piece of data and that you're bringing to your team or to your management team to influence. So I think that's a huge part. But for some of you out in the audience, if you are in a position of power, authority, position of authority in the data space, there are different things that you can think about, right? Because then your role becomes more about facilitation, about supporting and enabling those potential champions that are on the ground. So thinking about the training that you can give, there's tools, support you can give. But really, the last thing I'll say is the most important is the thinking about data velocity and data movement, right? Just facilitating that process of how do you go from source data to the output and helping you get access to a much better process of moving that data quickly from one place to another. So I think, when we think data leadership, it's almost the other way around. It's kind of like the guys on the ground are the ones, they're championing it, they're driving it, it's democratized, they're making the use case, but the ones on the top, they're playing the kind of support, facilitation, enablement role. Yeah.
Thanks, Tristan. Sarajit, what would you like to add?
I think all of that, the bottom-up kind of funneling of the use cases, everybody can be a champion. It's all about the democratization of the data, velocity of the data from source to target, as Tristan was talking about. And overall, the way I like to think about this is that, I like the data is the new sunlight. You can make copies of it. You can circulate it. It can be expensive, but you can also do it in a very cheap way. And as opposed to data is the new oil where you will store it and lock it up.
I love that analogy that data is like sunlight. What do you guys think of that? Does that resonate?
Definitely resonates because it warms my heart.
I think on the flip side also, it's funny because the data can definitely burn you. So just like sunlight, and I'm sure my colleagues on the call here have had experiences in the past where it's a two-edged sword sometimes. But it's great analogy. Great analogy.
I like that. So data can burn you. So as a data leader, what are some of those things that that sun protection that you can put on yourself? That analogy a little further.
So I guess since I raised that, maybe I can just talk about it. I think when I think about our journey, we had a bit of a you start with like there's no data and then nobody cares about data, nobody uses it. Then you start creating some systems, some processes, some use cases, and it's a bit more data. But then there's always this kind of like troubled phase, and I think Fiona, Sarajit, probably you're familiar with that, where there's too much data, right? Everybody wants a report and their own dashboard, and they're this and that, and there's 100 different reports for a single topic area, and it gets messy, right? So I think if you're starting a journey on data, I think this is one of the things to think about. If I could do what we did at Zuellig again, I would definitely think more carefully about things like agile governance, things about better process management, about organization structure, things like that. I have to facilitate, and it's a learning tool. You can't start that first, right? Because that's always more harmful. So I think that's the one thing, and the other thing is, data has all this privacy, confidentiality thing that we must be aware of, and it's hugely important. And as a community, I think as data leaders, we need to play a role in talking more about it, in considering what are the different options. Is it just a draconian framework, or is there a better way to think about data privacy that also then enables good analytics? So yeah.
So one of the things that springs to mind for me around where you could possibly get burnt with data is data democratization. You've obviously got data everywhere. People are doing things really, really quickly, and you do want to empower people to have data in their hands. But often that means that data is coming and can be replicated in many different spaces. And so, you can find the old throwback, I want the single source of truth. Let me be clear, I don't believe that you can get a single source of truth, and that's okay as well. I think as long as you can start to trace the lineage back to where you got the information and how things have been calculated along the way and how the data's been treated, we can all manage in that space. And it's much, much better than us having the old school way of doing data where you had to wait for developers to actually provide you with a bunch of different data metrics, and then you could go and analyze it. Data is moving so quickly nowadays, we simply can't wait for that. So it's how you treat the data, how you track the data, and then how you present that information through to your end stakeholders.
It's interesting. All three of you kind of touched upon a common theme, and I call it like the soft stuff is the hard stuff. So, we've got tools, we've got technology, but a lot of times the stuff that we're dealing with in organizations and even outside the organizations when we're talking about data is the change factor in it, changing ways of doing things, alignment. And we're in this very peculiar environment right now that our organizations, our society is going through massive change, with the onslaught of COVID-19 and everything that's kind of come out of that. How are you managing that in your organization? Like, how are you managing that hard stuff, which is in this time of change? Have you changed your priorities? Have you had to change the way that you go about as leading data within your organization? How have you created maybe some of the resources aren't there that maybe you had a while back or were expecting to have? How have you kind of navigated that? Sarajit, do you want to launch us off?
Oh, thanks. So we have, as we were discussing, I'm primarily been a buy guy. I believe that a lot of technology needs to be bought and adapted, but when you don't have the resources, you need to completely rethink. So first quarter, when the pandemic stuck, I completely changed my strategy, and I came up with the pickup strategy, the PICK, and pick yourself up, so to speak, both from metaphorically and really. So P stands for platformatization. So we're building 8 or 10 platforms where we are getting all the different across operations. So, and we are using the theme of connectedness. So you've connected people, connected assets, connected operations, connected decisions, and so on and so forth, which all need to be driven by that. The other is in-house. So we don't have the resources to go out, and we were creating a partner ecosystem, but now we need to be more selective as to what we buy from whom and in what time frame. That drove the prioritization. Now you can't bring things in-house. The partners were bringing in a lot of competency. So there's been a tremendous focus on competency development. And we have the 5+2 stack, which we have come up with, that competencies are around design thinking so that you start right. It's around getting your, agile, which is you have scrum trainers, you use whatever you have in a fast and the right fashion. Then it's about DevOps, because you need to make sure that there's continuous improvement and continuous development going on at the same time. Then you have low code, no code, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. And finally, visual characterization, as I said, is a very important part of it. And then we have Python as the universal language that you're writing. We're creating most of our architecture on the mean stack. So you have the JS plus Python forms the core of the stack. And then there are the KPI driven stuff. We were leading a $2 billion transformation program. We're still staying true to it. So as I keep saying, we've been inconvenienced, but not yet impaired or incapacitated. So we need to continue to soldier on, and tomorrow shall be better.
Great. Tristan.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Zuellig Pharma is healthcare, right? And it's pharmaceuticals. So COVID is
must be very busy for you right now.
Yeah, kind of could say so, but it's both. It's hard work. It's also emotionally trying. Mm. A lot of people are in the field at the moment, and warehouse staff are affected. And for most countries, we've had to make sure that we maintain high availability from an operations perspective to maintain the flow of medications. We tend to be the primary medication provider in most of the markets we operate in, especially for things like vaccines, right? So it's quite critical. And you can imagine in a situation like that where you don't know where your people are. Maybe they have had to stay 4 or 5 weeks in a warehouse, or they travel 3 hours out of the city, and then they're stuck there. So people movement becomes also a problem, right? So you have the need for a higher degree of operational efficiency because your supply chain has changed dramatically, right? People don't get as infected as they used to with the common flus because there's social distancing, but they start to take more vitamins. So your portfolio changes. Right? That's one, and then you have people movement because you want to keep them safe. And then the third one is that you have your partners and suppliers and your clients and your customers, and they're all they don't know what's happening next, right? So they want to figure out what's happening next. So I think we've had to. My strategy is completely different this year. It's a shambles now, the old one. So we've had to reframe completely to look at how do we play a stronger supportive role in COVID to answer those 3 areas using information, right? So the team has re-geared to kind of look at using information to try and shine a light on those areas. Mm-hmm. And one of the big ones that I always talk to my clients about is actually around prediction, right? So in a time where there's crisis like COVID, it has to be about anticipation rather than reaction. And data can help you react very well because it can help you keep your finger on the pulse, but it can also help you anticipate, right? And we need to be better in terms of planning what's going to happen in the next 6 months to a year, right? When is that vaccine going to come out? When it does come out, what are we going to do? And so, running a bit more complex analytics, and I'm actually a fan of very simple analytics, right? But like sometimes complexity or sophistication, not complexity, is beneficial. So I think that's kind of how we've had to look at it. And just the last point on your question is resourcing is tight, right? Like everybody's going through a tough time this year. The way we cope with it, and there's no magic number. If suddenly your budget's cut by half, that's your budget's half, right? But we do try to train our business units and functions to have people inside them have the capabilities to do the analysis. You'll find that they always have a good intuition about their functional area, their business area. It's more about the simple skills about how do you make things easier to do when you're doing an analysis. How do you make a dashboard or chart easy? How do you interpret and read? So we've set up a learning platform now for both partners and internal staff to teach them the core basics of analytics. And obviously, software like Tableau is fantastic for that because it's easy to learn, right? It's easy to pick up. So.
Thanks, Tristan. Fiona, I want to kind of draw upon something Tristan said, because I know in my conversation with you, we talked about how do we start building skills at that next generation of data leaders in this environment. And I know your industry has been impacted as well in terms of property and so forth. I'd love to hear about some of the things your organization's doing, if you can share.
Sure. So like many of the other panelists, we've had some shifts with what's going on in terms of our workload and with the strategies that we employ as well. But we've really started to focus on people because we know there's a massive impact to mental health, for instance, on people who are isolated and having to work from home. And so like many other organisations, we're running lots of Zoom meetings or Teams meetings, getting people on board. And some of them could be things that really aren't productive and getting work done, but they're really about bringing people together so they can have, those water cooler conversations. But more importantly, we've actually been investing quite heavily in training programs. So, for instance, recently we've just launched our visualization guidelines training, which is all about how to better communicate data with Tableau. And I've done it in conjunction with a Tableau Zen Master who works with JL also, Simon Beaumont. And the two of us have brought together a program that really helps to train our people how to employ our standards and guidelines. And they don't do much training or much listening. They do a lot of practice on what we call visicizers along the way. And that's really helping them perhaps with more of those technical skills, but understanding how to better communicate data to their end stakeholders. Aside from that, we also have programs, gamification programs, that do focus on some technical skills, but also focus on those soft skills as well. So what we do is we help people level up from rookies to rock stars on platforms like Tableau and Alteryx. But as they progress through their journey, what we do is we start to introduce things like brown bag sessions where they have to actually present back to their peers on an area of expertise or something that they've learned that they think will help people who are earlier in their journey get a hand up along the way. And what that does is it actually teaches them presentation skills. We help them to build their confidence along the way. We also get them to work on the community sites for Tableau and Alteryx as well. And what they do is they solve problems for other people. So they're really starting to give back. And when we give to people and we help people, we actually feel better about ourselves as well. So those are the sort of things that we're looking to invest in to help people through this journey.
Amazing. Sarajit, I know that you're doing similar things within Tata Steel. Is there anything you want to share in terms of how you're building the new leaders in this very exciting space?
It's so what we have a citizen data scientist program. So we basically said that you need to have if you wanted to be a technology company, then you need to have a technology readiness level, and then you need to have the army, almost the marine ops. You need to have the cadet corps, and then you need to have the entire citizen defense, almost like Israel does. And so the citizen data scientist journey is what we're really pushing, and Tableau has been the bulwark of that particular thing. And like Fiona said, all those things are what we're doing. We're also measuring how many people are using workbooks. We're saying it's a use it or lose it. If you did not use a Tableau Lite, which is an expensive resource in today's day and age, you would lose it after 1 month. We'll give it to those guys who are using it more. Some of the other stuff that we are doing is I liked what Tristan was saying, that you need to keep this very simple. So we've realized that if you want to be an anticipatory organization, there are basically 4 sets of skills. The visualization part, which is you should know what happened today, and you can then drill down and find out a bit about why it happened. There's the whole scenario part, is what are the things that can happen, and what are the payoffs in each of that. So we have a tool for that called AnyLogic, which is a very good mixed event simulation tool. Then you need to know, what is likely to happen. What is so that's a prediction tool, and we use Python there, and it makes most amount of sense. We used to have a bit of R, but that R is not really scalable, and you don't want to have a landscape which is very mosaic and museum. And then the last part that we kind of came up with is you need to then optimize on a stochastic front, because you really don't know what's going to happen. It's still a prediction. And so we use a tool called AIMS for our stochastic optimization. So within that entire cycle, visualization, scenario planning, prediction, and then stochastic optimization, it's a hard journey and you need to keep at it. But definitely that raises the data maturity and the data operating model for the entire company. It's a long journey. I see it spanning over 3 to 7 years, really.
Wow. How about in Zuellig, Tristan? I mean, are there some things that, in addition to what you were talking about when we were talking about the pandemic, but in terms of other initiatives that you guys are doing to kind of democratize this data and kind of spread these skills within the organization?
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on something Sarajit said as well. It really resonates with me, that idea of the cadet corps and the kind of citizen defense force, and then it's the kind of Marines. I think that's a great way to frame it. This is an industry where people is going to be, and if you're new to being a data leader or whatever, you'll find that people's actually one of your biggest battles, right? Like it's the biggest thing that you struggle with. And I always look at it from a kind of internal, external, like in however you want to frame it. Internal could be just your team or your organization, and external is your business stakeholders, or if you're a different type of company, internal could be your business, and external could be your clients, right? So, but then you always got to think about both, right? How do you manage your own people? Attrition and people movement in this space is phenomenal. It's so high. I don't know about some other markets, but in Singapore and some of our markets, I mean, people move very, very quickly, right? So you have to think about, how do you retain talent? How do you keep them upskilled? Because I think a lot of the analysts in the space, they are looking for new challenges, and they are looking to learn new methodologies, new languages, etc. And these are the things that drive them, right? So how do you rotate sufficiently within your organization to keep things fresh for your people? I think it's honestly, it's one of the biggest things that you will need to think about as a data leader. I think, how do you manage your own internal people? And on the second one, we do some analytics for our clients, and a lot of times you're only as good as your audience. So if you've got in like PhDs from all over the world, and the plus data scientists and all that, but your audience doesn't engage with that, or doesn't want to know about that, or they just want a very simple 2x2 diagram or a simple table, there's no point, right? So I think we also need to be aware and conscious of who the audience is, whether it's an internal stakeholder, your boss, or it's a client, and make sure that we are kind of matching expectations in terms of what analysis is required, and what will be acceptable, understandable from them. So it's very, very much a soft type of thing, right? You need to know who your audience is, and some people just don't respond well to data science concepts, right? When it comes to the crunch, right? And they just need that very simple chart. So I think it's people management, both from an internal, external, I think it's quite critical. But as my colleagues are talking, I'm taking a lot of notes because I'm actually learning quite a lot as well myself. So thanks for that.
Yeah. I'm sure the people listening are feeling the same. It's such a rich conversation. You guys have been in the field for quite some time within your organizations and other organizations, but I know you guys are also having an influence in the greater organization as well. And there's going to be a lot of people that are listening today that are going to be different parts of that journey. They could be starting out. This could be their, second role. They may be thinking of coming into this field. They just might be pure enthusiasts. What are some recommendations that you would give to them in terms of focus going forward, or things to think about? And I'm just going to leave that open for you, because I know you're probably going to come at it different ways, and that's what I love. Fiona,
so
want to kickstart?
Thanks. So for me personally, I would say there's a few things that have stood out that have helped me to leapfrog forward, and they really come back to the community. So the data community, there's a great Tableau community, there's a great Alteryx community, there's many other meetups that go on around the place. So engaging with other people and networking has really helped me to understand, as I'm navigating through some challenges, I've got some ideas about how to approach it. So all of a sudden, I've got this group of people with great experience in the same area that I work in, that sometimes they've been further down on the journey. So what I would recommend is going out. You can jump onto the community forums, or you can jump onto Twitter. There's a very active Tableau community on Twitter. So if you Tableau on there and start to see what's actually going on, great ambassadors that you can follow, and just reach out and say, hey, would you mind helping me with blah? And without a doubt, you'll get a response. The Tableau community will really, really help you to understand how to navigate your issues. The second thing that's been really useful for me in my journey as well is to travel overseas and to go to the overseas conferences. So I've been to over 10 conferences for Tableau around the world, and I've probably been to 5 for Alteryx as well. So it's broadened the kind of community that I get access to as well, and the network that I've built. And again, people in different countries are often further ahead in the curve as to what you've been as well. And so all of a sudden you've got this sort of capacity of people that you can call on. So I highly recommend those 2 things: get involved in the community, and when you can travel again for the conferences.
Thoroughly agree with you. Sarajit and Tristan, anything to close us off to add to that?
I think a couple of things to add to what Fiona said. I think if you're starting off, you may want to create a belief system. You want to create, get a few 3 or 4 very robust use cases, and to have champions in the organization who really wants those use cases to be solved. And then you need to find out at least the minimum viable technical skills to get the data to the use cases to get off. If you're an organization like us, which is we consider in the middle, so there you need to really start creating your data cataloging, data dictionaries. You need to create your data stewards. You need to look at your confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data. As Tristan was saying, you need to start measuring the efficiency and effectiveness of your supply chain. But if you're really an organization that now wants to lead, then you really need to start thinking like, okay, Wi-Fi 6 is here, 5G is here, and quantum computing is going to be there. How can I become a more anticipatory organizations? What can I do with blockchain in order to make sure the data is permissioned and trusted and secure? And how can I start, seeing that some of these platforms that I build, how can I onboard other people onto it and start monetizing my data? So those are some of the, you need to take a stock, and the same organization may be at different levels of maturity in different places. So it might make absolute sense for you to take a stock of both within the organization as a whole, as well as the different parts of the organization.
Maybe just a final couple of points. I was going to say output, and Sarajit put his finger on it. I mean, you have to be output focused. You have to be the use case focused, especially if you're early in the journey. That's going to be a starting point. You have to focus on a product or use case that's going to help somebody. And you should never lose that. Even if you're 10 years, 15, 20 years down the journey, that should still be your focus, right, in terms of that output. I think the second thing for me that always gets forgotten is actually the idea of run. And I look at some of the comments from Sarajit about DevOps and all that, because these get forgotten sometimes. So you build a use case, you build a product, and it gets used, and people are liking it. And then, people will go on to the next shiny thing, right? And they would forget about that old product. And we have to be disciplined in terms of thinking about what happens with that first use case that you did. Does that get decommissioned? Does it get extended? What is it required to maintain and sustain it? There's a resource needed to look after it on an ongoing basis, because you don't want to be always the kind of new and shiny, and then it just has a big bang, everybody loves it, but then it eventually tapers off and doesn't actually have lasting value, right? So thinking about the idea of lasting value of the things that you do is so important. You need to make your choices around your team and your investments to account for that, right? So I think that was the only one that I would add to the great comments that have been given so far.
Completely agree. I want to thank all three of you. Thank you, Tristan, Fiona, and Sarajit, for such an enlightened conversation. I always learn from these. I'm sure that our viewers have learned from them. And anyone who's listening today, if you'd like to learn more about how to become a data leader, please do check out the Data Village. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.